What up, Coordination? How you doing? On the pod today, we got Fabian, who is, wow, he's just such an OG. I mean, Fabian was one of the co-authors of ERC-20, which is the standard that all tokens, well, all fungible tokens on the Ethereum network use. And well, not all, but there's substandards that are derived from ERC-20. But ERC-20 is kind of like the godfather or the godmother of tokens on the Ethereum network. Fabian is also the author of ERC-725, which is a standard around identity on the Ethereum network. And if you've been following season 2 of the GreenPilled podcast, you know that we're talking a lot about decentralized identity and how it can create a more green-pilled world by allowing us to track our interactions with each other, create more positive sum games through repeat interactions. Fabian was also involved in the Mist project, which is before MetaMask and Infura, one of the ways that you could integrate with the Web3 based web. And he's just been a lead engineer / thinker in the Ethereum space for the last half a decade. And that's exciting to me because we're now not pushing forward standards for tokens and Mist browsers and stuff like that. We're now pushing on universal identity and account abstraction. And so this episode, we're basically covering the opportunity space of identity and creating new token standards. And also Fabian's working on this layer 1 called the LUKSO network that is going to put a lot of these ideas in practice. They have some really beautiful APIs, designs, and you know, Fabian was right in the right place in a lot of things in the past of Ethereum. So that gives me a lot of confidence that he's going to be in the right place and onto something when it comes to identity and some of the trends that we're following on the GreenPilled podcast. So Fabian is just a gigabrain. He's really smart. He's an engineer. He also speaks marketing. He also understands the space really well. And so I think this is a really fun episode. So without further ado, I give you Fabian. Enjoy.
The GLOW dollar is a new stablecoin with a very special property. As the market cap of GLOW goes up, extreme poverty goes down. GLOW stands for Global Income Coin. It's a dollar-backed, non-profit stablecoin that creates basic income for people living in extreme poverty. GLOW is basically the same business model as USDC, with yield-generating treasuries on one side and a stablecoin on Ethereum on the other. But instead of being a for-profit company, GLOW is a non-profit that donates 100% of all yields from the GLOW Reserve to Give Directly's basic income program. Give Directly is a charity that gives money to people living in poverty and is a charity that Vitalik has previously donated to and supported in the past. Through the GLOW nonprofit, you can reduce poverty by just holding a stablecoin. GLOW is launching in early 2023, and you can join the waitlist at glowdollar.org/greenpill. That's glowdollar.org/greenpill. Hey Bankless Nation, if you're listening to this, it's because you're on the free Bankless RSS feed. Did you know that there's an ad-free version of Bankless that comes with the Bankless Premium subscription? No ads, just straight to the content. But that's just one of many things that a premium subscription gets you. There's also the Token Report, a monthly bullish, bearish, neutral report on the hottest tokens of the month. And the regular updates from the Token Report go into the Token Bible, your first stop shop for every token worth investigating in crypto. Bankless Premium also gets you a 30% discount to the permissionless conference, which means it basically just pays for itself. There's also the airdrop guide to make sure you don't miss a drop in 2023, but really, the best part about Bankless Premium is hanging out with me, Ryan, and the rest of the Bankless team in the Inner Circle Discord, only for premium members. Want the alpha? Check out Ben the Analyst's Degen Pit, where you can ask him questions about the Token Report. Got a question? I've got my own Q&A room for any questions that you might have. At Bankless, we have huge things planned for 2023, including a new website with login with your Ethereum address capabilities, and we're super excited to ship what we are calling Bankless 2.0 soon TM. So if you want extra help exploring the frontier, subscribe to Bankless Premium. It's under 50 cents a day and provides a wealth of knowledge and support on your journey west. I'll see you in the Discord.
Hey Fabian, how you doing, man?
Good. I mean, I got sick the last weekend, but that's why my voice is a little different than usual. But I'm good now.
Yeah, we're transitioning to winter, so I think things are getting colder, and I'm glad you're feeling better. Well, Fabian, I've been following your work for years. You're the author of the ERC-20 and ERC-725 standards. You worked on Mist, Web3.js, and lots of great things in the Ethereum ecosystem, and excited to catch up and talk about your most recent work. So where should we dive in?
I think we can talk a little bit about my path getting to LUKSO. I think that's a good idea. And then I think the standards is probably the next important thing That's what people
Yeah.
right now talked about on DEF CON a lot. So
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think the standards you've worked on have been really influential on the ecosystem. So yeah, let's start with your path to getting to LUKSO and working on those standards.
So the kind of short version of it is worked at the Ethereum Foundation as lead Ðapp developer. From there, I built together with Alexander van der Sande the Mist browser. He was a pretty vocal person at the time, in Ethereum. He came up with the Mist browser concept, and really the most fascinating thing about the Mist browser concept is that most of the things that he described in his video are not even done yet, and in fact now will be possible with universal profiles and the new standards I have built. Lots of these things that he had in this video can now be done nicely.
So I just wanted to interject for the listeners who don't know. Mist browser was a bundled kind of web browser where you would sync the blockchain locally, and then you could do Web3 enabled things. And it kind of was it was sort of the first idea of integrating Web3 into a browser based experience. But I think that it didn't really take off because you had to download and sync the whole blockchain in order to be able to do anything. And browser extensions that you could install and point to Infura kind of beat Mist in the marketplace, but it was still a useful proof of concept. Is that an accurate portrayal of the Mist project?
Actually, the Mist browser was the thing that initiated all of this. So MetaMask was the answer to the Mist browser, and we could have also,
Right.
we could have always pointed to an external source for the nodes. The idea of the Mist browser was really to try it the full decentralized way. Like, you run your own node, you have a local browser that can run Ddapps. By building the Mist browser, by building the first wallet, we had to literally invent the way Ddapps work and how Ddapps even exist. MetaMask then was kind of like, trying to make the simpler version of the Mist browser by saying, hey, instead of making a full browser, we just make a browser extension. And like they kind of like, came out of Mist in a way. But it was the centralized version of it because you didn't run your own node, right? And out of this came literally later everything else we had after that. So the Mist browser was kind of the initiation and the initial first ever Ddap browser. In fact, yes, first ever Web3 browser, if you want to call it like that. And we had to define a lot of pieces in that time. We had to define of how you talk to a Ddap, right? Which later, I provided, came up with the Ethereum provider standard, which was a bit more generic. Initially, we just exposed the Web3 object into the Ddap, which then Ddapps used to talk to, the browser, or later even MetaMask. MetaMask overtook that, we had the first Ethereum wallet running this way and figured out a lot of things along the way.
So, I mean, as a listener and someone who's followed your career, what I kind of take away from this is that, Fabian, you've been sort of on the forefront of innovating in Web3 for years. And so I look backwards in the rearview mirror at the success of ERC-20 and 725 and Web3.js. And it allows me to have a lot of confidence looking forward that you're going to help us continue to innovate with universal profiles and the work that you're doing these days. So it's been a long journey, and I'm curious. I'm curious about ERC-20. Maybe that's the next, at least the next thing to chat about. Tell me about working on the ERC-20 standard, because that's the foundation of everything in this space.
It is. That's actually the least contribution I made. I mean, from my perspective, because this was really initially Vitalik's proposal. It was on the wiki page. We had to chat like as a few developers. I'm not sure, there were like 3 or 4 of us debating how a token could look like in a smart contract form. And at the time, there was this EIP repository that Martin BC created to discuss Ethereum proposals around the network. And literally just 2 weeks before he created this. So I thought that's a great place to discuss a standard. So instead of this niche wiki page where nobody's really paying attention, let's just talk there. And so I had to come up with a format that was more specification-like. So I kind of, referenced the RFC specification way with a bit simpler form, and I called it Ethereum request for comment because I thought it was a great way to get input from the community and then have a proper standard. The request for comment became then even the name for the standard, and it was the issue number 20, which created ERC-20. And I did some small changes. We had the discussion of 60 people over like a few months period, and people started adopting it, and that this became, the token. What's really interesting for me, though, is how such a simple agreement on just a few functions can have such a strong impact on all the things you can build on a programmable blockchain, right? And this is, in my opinion, the most fascinating thing to see how, what comes out of so little agreement, if you want. And yes, it built the basis, right? ICOs came out of it, DeFi came out of it, NFTs came out of it, literally everything came out of it. And what I'm now doing, and this is really why I took this as a learning, which was purely, I would say, a coincidence even, that this took off that big time. There was a need at the time. But like taking this learning and then making this more consciously right, that's what I'm doing now. Like coming up with the next set of standards that are fundamentally important for the future of this space, but doing it with some thought and doing it with some way where I can already anticipate things and put them together in the right way, that they create a great foundation for things to be built in the future. While ERC-20, it was on the end purely, like people said they want tokens. Vitalik thought a little bit, came up with this idea. We discussed around it, made it a bit better, changed things, and came up with some basic bare bone thing without really stretching our thoughts too far in the future, trying to make a too complex system, because first something needed to be adopted, right? That's now different when you have all this experience, what happened over these years, and you see, what went good, what went wrong, what could be improved. Now you can make it right, and you now can make it way better with some experience that exists now, which didn't exist at all in 2015 November. 6 months, 8 months after the mainnet was started, right? It was a very different time. So that actually, I think puts me in a way better position to do these standards or improve these standards and create these new standards that I have done now over the last few years together with my team.
I'm wondering if you could do ERC-20 all over again. Is there anything that you would change, given the gift of perfect hindsight?
I am actually doing ERC-20 all over again. Actually, we have done it. We call it LUKSO standard proposal number 7. So it's called LSP7, and this is literally the new ERC-20. So it's actually, I did exactly that. So what was improved is, number one, the way of that actually this token standard calls other smart contracts, right? This idea was not new, right? There was ERC-777, 223, even 721 has this kind of on tokens received function built in. But how we did it is we did it in a generic way. So that's a generic function you call called universal receiver that basically can notify any smart contract, especially profiles, whatever exists in the future, in a generic way. That means you can now send tokens to a smart contract, and the smart contract can react on it, which is the biggest pain point of ERC-20, for example, that you have to constantly do this, approve and transfer from kind of double call, just to make a smart contract understand that he received some tokens, which is, I guess, the most biggest pain point of DeFi, in fact. So yes, that's improved. What's also improved is to have batch calls built in. What's also improved is that you have an unlimited way of adding metadata, smart contract readable metadata, to your token. So now you can reference a JSON file with some pictures and name and description, website and whatever, but you can also reference other protocols or other tokens or other systems that somehow relate to the token. You have literally an unlimited key value store that you can attach to your token contract, which will make these extremely extensible in a standardized way. So that's kind of the major improvements. There's a lot more smaller detail improvements. But also really what's nice now is the naming. And I think when it comes to standards, one of the most important thing is having an intuitive naming, having something that kind of developers ideally get and kind of can remember without constantly having to go back to documentation and reading it again and again. And right now, for example, there's a lot of differences between ERC-20 and ERC-721 in terms of how the functions are named, purely because they all thought they want to improve it and change it, and then they give it different function names and all of this, and that makes it very confusing for people. So when you do these standards from scratch and you really don't care about the past, because you create a new network and you can literally do things right, we can clean up that mess and kind of unify function names in a way that they are now consistent across NFTs and token standards and in the way they act and behave and everything. So it's also a clean house cleaning task that we did in a way on top of that improvement.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, having users is a double-edged sword because you have network effects that come out of that, but you also have a lot of legacy things that if you could do it all over again, you'd probably do differently. So I'd love to segue from ERC. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, exactly. I mean, I fully agree with you. This is exactly the big problem that Ethereum's standard space has, right? There's a lot of people who want to propose things, but there's a lot of people who already went with some way, right? And they already went down rabbit hole A. So it's very hard to convince them to go to rabbit hole C or D. And if you create a new network from scratch, people are very willing to adopt and use the new standard from scratch. That gives, basically, if they're the right standards in the right way, give people a lot more possibilities of what they can build. And you can create a whole different user experience. Something very hard to push through in an existing network. And this is really a little bit same with Bitcoin, by the way, and any other network, right? They always have that baggage of people have a way of doing things and they kind of want to stick with it in a way.
Yeah. Backwards compatibility is a problem, but also, yeah. So I mean, I'd love to segue from talking from ERC-20, which is a foundational part of tokens in the Ethereum space, to ERC-725, which is an identity standard. And just as I prompt you to talk about ERC-725, one of the this is the Green Pill podcast. We're talking about regenerative uses of crypto, positive sum uses of crypto. And one of sort of the ideas that we've been playing with is this idea that with identity, we can now have these pseudonymous identities where, because we can track our interactions with each other, we can have more positive sum games through repeat interactions with each other, therefore complexifying the design space and allowing for more regenerative crypto projects to be built. So I'm just really curious to know, why ERC-725 was proposed, how it's going, and maybe you could give us a little bit of a hint of how that's evolving into universal profiles from your vantage point.
I mean, first off, you're totally right. The biggest missing piece in blockchain is identity. I mean, we have an identifier. It's an address. It's just a very unhuman readable identifier, and that's the big issue. And it's not really identifiable by machines, yes, by people, not so much. And that's the biggest issue. And that's exactly why a lot of use cases aren't happening. And that's why literally the NFT space is fucked. If I can say that in this podcast, I'm not sure how you but I mean, it's basically a problem because the identifying creators are not very visible, right? Your product, your NFT is visible. You as the actual person, group, DAO, brand, whatever created it, totally invisible. So 725 basically came initially out of some workshops I did, and the idea was, let's create a smart contract-based account system. I had to make some thoughts about how to do this. I came up with a very basic concept, which was the first version of 725. I somehow, after that, had this urge to propose this as a standard. And I was working at Ethereum. I had literally no idea or interest in doing anything with identity whatsoever. There was Civic Protocol and what's the consensus version? Uport at the time.
I think Uport, yeah.
No, they were all like the big players at the time, and I had totally nothing to do with this. I just had this urge that I need to somehow write this in a doc as an ERC, which I did. Somehow it took traction. People got all like really interested in that, and Uport got quite offended because they said, "Oh my god, a smart contract-based account system? Are you crazy?" And you cannot put everything on chain, and wrote big articles like saying why this is a monolith and they want to build a modular system. Long story short, I literally thought other people would go do something with the standard. I continued work on Web3.js and other things in Ethereum. I just put it out there. It got traction. There was the Origin protocol that they created this alliance, and people now all subscribe to using it, blah, blah, blah. What happened, funny enough, is that nobody really took the lead on this evolve the standard forward, because it was not done. It was like the basic idea. Somehow then at some point there came this guy, Taylor Osaka, I think, and he said, hey, here I can build an implementation for this, I want to try. And I said, sure, go ahead, do. And then he came back and he had some extra ideas of what we could improve, and then really I changed it a little up with him together. And then I think a few weeks later he just left and said, I would stop coding, I would become a doctor. I was like, okay, great, whatever. Then I was sitting there still, and when I started LUKSO, I realized that this standard is so extremely fundamental to everything we wanted to do, because we want to create a blockchain for the new creative economy, where identity, obviously, if you create stuff, right, the creator is quite important. And not only, do you need to identify people who create stuff, but you also need a user experience in blockchain that actually people can manage. And really thinking about ERC-725, it was in, I think, November 2017 when I proposed it, up until really when I started really building it out in detail, which was 2019 or so. I thought a lot about it. I don't know, somehow it didn't let me go, this then I pondered it around my head over the years, and on the end, I really got to like more and more ideas of what can be done with it and how it can be done and blah, 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 and all of the things. And so long story short, we built it out over the last 2 years, exactly all the things that were missing that I thought need to be added were built it out. It's not only one standard, it's a set of 14, actually we have 17 standards now, where 725 is a core building block of many of them, because 725 itself is actually a very generic standard. It's two pieces, it's two parts of a standard. One is a generic execution, so you can just execute to the smart contract onto any other smart contract. It's totally generic execution, do whatever you want. And the second is a generic key value store. What's the benefit over a generic key value store versus writing variables in a smart contract? If you have a smart contract and you have two functions, like name and symbol of a token, right? You deploy the smart contract, that's it, that's all you got, right? You can now have a name and a symbol, maybe you can change it, that's it. But if you would add like some third thing, like a website, whatever, right, you couldn't anymore. If you have a generic key value store, you can extend this for the foreseeable future in whatever way you want. You could say, okay, one of these, added variables is now an address, or it's a new protocol, or it's like a reference a new JSON document, or what the heck you want to add, right? You can add millions of entries to a smart contract now. That makes things extremely extensible from an information point of view, which can also be used for extending logic and all kinds of stuff. So that's the combination, that's the ground piece. That works really well for a new metadata standard for tokens. It works really well for a profile smart contract. It works really well for all kinds of new type of smart contracts that we haven't even thought about yet. And so we have built out all of this groundwork, and we have this thing called universal profiles, which is a combination of a few smart contracts. Number one, it's your core account. That's obviously your address. That's the thing you don't want to change over time, right? That's where you gain your reputation. This one is a full-on profile. You can attach a profile picture. You can act through it on chain. You can do lots of really cool features that I guess more developers would be interested in. But you can also better manage it, because that one account is controlled by another account that we call a key manager, and specifically LSP6 key manager. And by having a key manager, now you can have multiple keys controlling that one account. So that's a very similar thing to what people discuss now in Ethereum with account abstraction, right? There's many account abstraction proposals. Some want to solve it on a smart contract level, others want to solve it on a minor level. LSP6 and ERC-725 account is kind of like a smart contract level version account abstraction, and a lot more than that. What it gives you is an internet, like a blockchain-based account that you can use to hold stuff, hold token, interact, have a profile picture, have a reputation, have a follower system, have a decentralized Twitter, have whatever heck you want on your Web3 account while managing it through, your mobile phone, your computer, your hardware wallet, your ring you will have in the finger, what are your AR glasses, act in a game through your decentralized account, do whatever else you want. At the same time, other people can pay for your gas, which makes onboarding very seamless. Like no more go to an exchange and get some tokens kind of thing. You can just like literally go to a service, say, create me a profile, give me 3 months, I pay you next month, type of thing. That will onboard a lot of people to Web3. And at the same time, they have a full-on account that can even extend, that can react to assets. I mean, the feature list is crazy long and very detailed, but it's kind of like, for some people in the blockchain space, Argent, but standardized on a very deep level. Hyper modular and super feature rich.
I'm curious if you can paint us a picture of what the coolest use cases that can be built on top of 725 and universal profiles, this suite of identity-based systems. What are you most excited about that this enables?
I mean, this is this very similar question, like, if you would ask me in 2015, what do you think will happen with tokens, right? It was very hard to imagine ICOs. I mean, ICOs were pretty okay. They were straightforward, but the craziness of ICOs were not so straightforward. But DeFi, and it was clear that these things will happen, but the shape they took, the complexity they took, the markets they created, and NFTs and all of these things, in that detail and level was not so easy to imagine. I mean, we knew people can make NFTs. We know that people will use whatever compounded tokens and do whatever, but not in that kind of detail. Same here. It's such a flexible core piece that it's very hard to imagine all of the things. I mean, what's maybe probably very clear is decentralized social media, for example, right? You can have a decentralized blockchain-based account that's your decentralized social media account. It will be your login to websites, but it will also be your social media account. But at the same time, it's also your wallet. So it's all of these things combined. You will probably have multiple of those profiles. Some you use for anonymity reasons, other you use as a public person. But you will definitely want to stick with certain accounts because reputation only builds onto like verifiable and accounts that you can actually follow and see, right? If they constantly swap and change, and my son has this great idea to constantly change his username in Discord, I have a really hard time finding him because every time I search, like, his name has changed and it's really hard to find him. Here you have literally a unique identifier that solves that root identity problem. That exactly is the reason why almost none of the other identity protocols really succeeded. Either they just invented a bullshit token, or they said we are totally generic and we're off chain, which on the end means, okay, where do I go look and find you or the account or whatever I'm looking for, right? But yeah, decentralized social media, I think, creator economy, right? Being a brand on the blockchain, you want to be visible. You want to be the place that, people know where to go. When they want to look for a new mint, they want to know and see your profile and see, oh, profile, X just created a new collection or something, right? You want to be able to have transparency on chain, not OpenSea transparency, but a transparency that's cross apps application, right? That's not one app having a profile now. That's every app has the same profile now. That's why universal profiles, right? So it changes the game for everything. And all of these, doing good projects can now happen because we can create DAOs where members are visible. We have DAOs with the universal profiles themselves. So they will have a profile picture and information attached and protocols attached and logic attached to it, whatever. You can now have communities run and organize themselves in a very transparent and very blockchain-based way. And we haven't seen that really. Like, DAOs today are Discord communities. That's not a DAO. It's just a Discord community with a DAO name tag. Yeah. We will have real DAOs, let's say. We will have real decentralized communities. We will have everything that we couldn't do so far because the identity was missing. And nothing restricts it. So
yeah. Well, I think that I just really fully believe that identity is one of the key building blocks of making this space actually useful for everyday people. And it seems like there's a couple competing visions slash standards. I'd be curious what you think of like Evan McMullen's criticisms of on-chain identities in that they don't allow for privacy. I'd be curious what you think of decentralized society. What do you think of the other trends that are happening in the identity space, and where do you differ from other major players that are working in the identity space in terms of vision and execution?
Hmm. A lot of questions. Okay, the critic point with, I mean, I think lots of people in the old school identity space, how I would call that, or in the one which was more like before blockchain, would definitely say,
Hmm.
hey, you can never put something like this on a blockchain, right? My argument would be the following. First off, it's not about hard identity. It's not about an identity that's necessarily identifying you as a person. It's about creating an identifiable account or profile. That could be an AI, could be a gamer identity, it could be whatever. It doesn't need to be you as a person. So what I do, I differentiate between soft identity and hard identity. Hard identity is your passport, social security, everything that has to do with your livelihood and your actual physical person. Soft identity is your internet account, your gamer account, your Instagram account, anything that's literally more like a creation than it is actually real life, right? It's a curated persona that could be, looking like you physically, or could be totally abstract. Today with CryptoPunks, everybody's totally abstract in Twitter now, right? Everybody's back to being a pixel figure. And so when you make, I think the biggest difference to other protocols is they always try to solve hard identity. I don't try to solve hard identity. It will be solved through that as well, but I rather want to have soft identity. That's what everybody actually needs really first. The thing with um, privacy, you can have any kind of selective revealing protocols built on top of this, right? Where you have certain information that people can verify you have, and you only reveal it to certain parties, or you can have ZK snarks in some way where it verifies stuff or prove things. That's all possible to build on top of this. Yes, if you put your face on a profile account and then you say that's me, people can watch you on the blockchain. This is the same today, right? If you put your address on Twitter and say that's me, guys, I mean, people can follow you what you do on Ethereum, right? Or if you put an ENS name. So it's the same thing. And that's actually a problem of the technology, because we don't have fully programmable blockchains that are at the same time totally private. So we have to live with what we have. At the same time, when we look at Facebook and others, people are pretty interested in making themselves public. And I believe if we look a bit more from a philosophical point of view, if you live in a village, right, and you do something at some point, either something nice or something bad or whatever, or something weird, people in the village remember, right, for some period of time that you did it. So as much as this right to be forgotten is a nice idea, you can also not go into the village to everyone and say, hey, can you please forget that I did that, because I just chose to not want to have that memory anymore. And you all need to also forget now. So if we do things in a public space, and a blockchain is a public space, probably also makes sense that it stays there because it was actually part of history. And the internet is the same. It doesn't forget either. You can maybe force Google or any other platform to not reveal it, but still going to be there. Somebody downloaded this to his computer, still going to be there. It would be ideal to have a blockchain that's totally verifiable and private, but we don't have that. So as long as that's not the case, why wouldn't we now make public account systems? Because it's actually quite useful to have, specifically for anything that has to do with culture, groups, DAOs, brands, creators, and all of these, where transparency and verifiability is the absolute most important thing. Like, how can you
Mm.
become a famous brand if you are like unknown? That's somehow not going together well, right? You want to be transparent. You want to show what you do. And honestly, if you choose to be anonymous, don't put a picture. Don't say it's your account. and you have your blockchain
Yeah.
anonymity you have today. So that's pretty much.
Yeah, there's a really interesting episode on Bankless in which Evan McMullen and Vitalik talk about the various merits of soulbound tokens in Vitalik's case and off-chain DIDs and verifiable credentials. And I think that it's an important thing to get right. So I'll just direct listeners to that show if they want to learn more about identity and privacy. I'm curious if you've read the Decentralized Society paper, Fabian, by Vitalik and Glenn and Pooja, and if so, what you think of that vision of blockchain-based identity. I can quickly recap it if you'd like.
Yeah, please do, because I have not. I'm too
Yeah.
busy inventing that than reading about it.
So the idea, yeah, no, the idea with Decentralized Society, which is it was called like Searching for Web3's Soul was the name of the paper,
Yeah.
but because it was all about soulbound tokens, which are basically NFTs that can't be transferred. Like, say I go to some event and I get an NFT from that event that says that went to it, and it can't be transferred. That makes it so that it can't be financialized. And so the ultimate articulation of this vision is that Vitalik and Glenn imagine this sort of web of trust where, say, I sent you, actually, I should do this now that I think about it. I should send you an NFT saying you've been a guest on the GreenPilled podcast. And that's an identity signal about our relationship with each other at scale. If you're sending tokens, whether they're POAPs or soulbound tokens to other people, there's a web of trust that we can use to bootstrap things like Sybil resistance and under collateralized loans and Web3 social networks with profiles and stuff like that. And so that's kind of the articulation of decentralized society. And I'd be curious if we could compare and contrast that with your vision and what you're working on with 725 and universal profiles, if there's any overlap.
It's completely overlapping. What I built is exactly the ground structure for this. So so universal profiles are the soul of soulbound tokens. I personally don't really like these kind of naming convention that Vitalik chose, because he was I guess, Warhammer game or whatever this game was that he was into.
Yeah, World of Warcraft.
World of Warcraft, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, I call them non-transferable tokens. I like a bit more the logical naming, then it's not so ambiguous. But if you call it soulbound token, universal profiles are the soul. And the problem right now is exactly that there is no soul. Your wallet account is not a soul. This is not something you can ever use for that, because you forget your private key and what? All your reputation and social interactions are now stuck and gone, or basically it's unmanageable. It's not a reputation system that works in any way. Or your friend gets hold of it and now they can be you and access you. So what we're missing is a soul. Universal profiles are the soul for soulbound tokens. And yes, exactly what I described before. You can attach a reputation system that could be based on an NFT or a non-transferable token. That could be based on some kind of registry that people agree to, some kind of point system. Actually, I would be building these more on top of a point system. But yes, I mean, for example, we had a hackathon and we gave people a participant NFT and so on. Right now, they're transferable, but I mean, it's very easy to make them non-transferable once we launch mainnet. And then something that's stuck on your profile. And the good thing is, because your profile is very hard to lose, not like a key, it actually can, like this society and this vision they are saying, I'm fully agree with this, by the way, was totally able to happen. And the only reason why it couldn't happen so far is because people like use wallet private keys as their accounts, which is obviously not the way it can happen ever. But if you have a profile that you, in the worst case, can social recover, or you even have a third-party recovery service you trust, or you have even 5 devices you control it from. So if like 4 are gone, you still have access, or you have a DAO that could gain you access back. Everything now possible, right? Then you can actually literally have stuffed and stuck it on a profile and literally make it unmovable. You don't even need to think about a logic anymore of how you moved it in whatever case of loss, because it's unlosable. And that changes the game. So I fully agree with what they're saying, and this is what I have built the foundation for now. It's there. It's literally to be going very soon there, to be experienced by people and by developers, really. And this is now all possible. Yeah, it will change the game. Yeah.
So I'm curious, given that we only have about 10 minutes left, if we can start converging, I'd be curious, you know, wh- what what you're focused on now, how people can help contribute, and how people can get involved in building this future that you're working on.
Yeah. All right. So basically, we will start our mainnet in the coming month. Um, that's basically we are starting a new Ethereum. Let's call it like this because it's actually ETH2 type of network, just a new network focused on the new creative economy. I don't want to see it as a competition to Ethereum. It might end up being that, but I see it more as an, let's call it, sister network extension right now. But it's built as a new network because we need to have these new basic standards, and we have to have this focus of these people who build on these new kind of setups because they enable all of these new things that we just talked about in the past. So we have the standards, we have the smart contract implementation, we have a browser extension you can test out, and there's a whole documentation page. We can read about all of this. So if you're a developer and you want to really build all of these things you, for example, mentioned, right? The ones in the social space, in the uh, not degen but regen, how you call that, regen space. Uh,
Yep.
then this is the tool chain for doing that. It is the absolute tool chain. You could use universal profiles on any other EVM chain. That's possible. It's only on the end just smart contract standards. Our browser extension won't support that out of the box, obviously, for for obvious reasons. Um, but what's really missing is the transaction relay services. That's what you want. So, and we will run one. We will have one from the get-go. And another reason why in your network is we can fund early users, we can subsidize their profiles, and we can subsidize their initial transactions. That's how you basically get to use the blockchain right away without any of the hassle. Um, what we also instigating, through our hackathons and others, for example, the one we did at Gitcoin, uh, is for others to build transaction relay services now, because all of this is standardized. Building one is fairly simple, so you can basically be the mobile or phone provider or internet service provider of the blockchain and say, come sign up with me, get a free profile and 10 million gas, and then subscribe next month. And that's how you get people using blockchain without they being scared away. They can also be then the first recovery service of your profile and all of that, Web2 ease of use we know. While at the same time you have a full-on Web3 profile and you can kick them out at any point in time and even pay your own transaction fees if you like. Just fill up your controller key with some fees, some money, and that's it. So it requires a bit more things. That's why LUKSO, the mainnet, we the transaction relay service initially, and all of these things for this to take off. Eventually it will trickle down to other networks as well. So if you're a developer and builder, go read the docs, understand how to do this. It's not a lot of things you need to understand if you just want to make a Dd'app that works with MetaMask right now. You literally have to change nothing. But if you want to use the power of universal profiles, if you really want to do something around profiles, just read the docs and read how you attach information, how you get permission, set permission to whatever you want. And then you can really invent the next level social protocols, community protocols, DAOs, whatever else you want. And it's going to be a lot easier for you doing that than it has been the last 5 years, where none of these basic things were solved. Right.
I'm curious, if you can project us out 10 years into the future. I know when I asked you about like what would the ultimate use of tokens be, you were kind of like, well, could really predict what that would look like. But if you could do your best as someone who's been on the frontier of technology trends, like if LUKSO and universal profiles are maximally successful, what kind of impact do you think that has on the world? What is the ultimate sort of North Star that you're chasing? I don't know, let's say in 2032, if we have you back on the Green
Right.
Pill podcast, what does the world look like at that point?
I mean, on the end, this technology, these standards will benefit the whole blockchain space at large, not just LUKSO, but LUKSO will be the initiator of it. What I see is basically it will completely disrupt society as we function today, like on a fundamental basis, because you can now self-organize with actual real people that really can use this new technology, all the power that Web3 gives you of self-organization, of like self-sovereignty and all of this. now becomes possible and in the hands of everyone. And it will change. What I see is really like a unification of the world. That's I'm not sure if that's in 10 years. It's more like in 20 or something, or 30 maybe.
Yeah.
Borders will dissolve. Power will dissolve. How we operate on a global scale, how we, act on issues and decide on things will completely massively disrupt. You can build, decentralized global voting systems. You can have actors and DAOs that own like billions now and can, act globally on a fully decentralized scale in whatever way these people and groups want. And it will completely change the game. Everything will be going hyper democratic. Everything will go very well funded too. I mean, the whole world now will actually have a lot of groups that have a lot of very positive impact with a lot of funding, and all of this old world, structures where it was so hard to even do an impact. It will really go to a mass acceleration of everything. And on the end, it's up to people what they do with this technology. It's a tool. Anything could be done, and I really hope it's all for the better. So we just give people and humanity a tool of exactly the Web3 tech stack, but user friendly and accessible. And that's going to change everything going forward in the next 10 years for sure. 20, absolutely.
All right. Well, if GreenPilled Podcast is still around in 10 years, we'll have to have you back and do a review of how it went. But is there anything I didn't ask that you want to say?
No, I think I'm good. I mean, on the end, it's a new technology. It's a new set of standards. It's more complex than ERC-20. Once you get the concepts, it's actually not really hard to understand. It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It takes a little digging initially. Once you use these things, it will become more and more clear. It's unleashing a bit more complex set of standards that are working in concert together. Than what we had in the past, where somebody comes up with one standard proposal and says, hey, here, one smart contract function, let's go. Now it's a bit more complex, but it's actually very modular, very extensible, very structured, but at the same time extremely flexible. And I have thought a lot about this stuff. My team, and we built this out, thought a lot about this. We are blown away ourselves every single time with the flexibility in what you could now build. So even for us, it's not clear all the stuff that could be built now. So I think there will be some years of people really diving into this, but it's going to be very interesting to watch what people build. And that's really what excites me, seeing how people will use this and where this all will be going. And yeah, it's probably very crazy. So I also want to watch back, in 10 years, see all the stuff
See how right you got it
through this technology. It's going to be very interesting. I mean, we've seen that with ERC-20, right? We've seen that with all of the other stuff in the recent years. I mean, looking back, and it's crazy if you look at this, what happened. It was not totally like that obvious, back in the day when we just came up with it. So it will be like this again, just massively on a larger scale, because you can do a lot more things, right? A lot more things. Because identity is the missing piece. Really, that fundamental piece has been missing in the blockchain space. And I do a claim now I solved it, but let's see in a few months and years.
Great. Well, where can people find you online, Fabian?
Okay, LUKSO.network is the website. We have a Discord community. LUKSO_IO is the Twitter. My Twitter is @Findura, or just search for my name on Twitter. Just Twitter is really the space that I communicate. LUKSO communicates. Discord, and just follow the mainnet launch. Follow the tech. Use it. Play around. Create a profile. Start to care about your profile and use it. And there we go.
Amazing. Fabian, thanks so much for joining us and telling us your vision for LUKSO and universal profiles. And See you out there on crypto Twitter.
Thanks for having me.